Уважаемый господин Rouhani, уважаемый
Mr. Rouhani, Mr. Erdogan, distinguished colleagues, first and foremost, I would like to thank all of you for accepting the invitation for coming to Sochi, to Russia, in order to talk about our next joint steps with regard to Syria. The large-scale operations against terrorist groups in Syria are coming to an end. I would like to take note of the fact that thanks to the efforts of Russia, Iran and Turkey, we have managed to prevent the disintegration of Syria, to prevent it from being seized by international terrorists, as well as to avoid a humanitarian catastrophe. Indeed, a decisive blow has been dealt to militants in Syria, and right now a genuine chance has emerged to put an end to many years of civil war. Less than a year ago, we launched the Astana process. We assumed the responsibility to ensure that the agreements reached will be implemented to further the intra-Syrian dialogue in Geneva under the UN aegis. For the first time, we managed to bring at one negotiating table the representatives of both the government and the armed opposition. I should like to take note of the special role of the President of Turkey and the President of Iran. Were it not for your position, the Astana process would not exist. The cessation of hostilities would not have been achieved, the ceasefire would not have been achieved, or the de-escalation zones either. After 7 rounds of talks in Astana, landmark decisions have been made for Syria. The cessation of hostilities regime is being observed. 4 de-escalation zones have been established and functioning in the key areas of the country. Right now, there are firm grounds to believe that we have arrived at a new stage which opens up an opportunity to get down to genuine political settlement. I believe that our efforts have to be concentrated on ensuring a long-term normalization in Syria. Primarily, I refer to the process of political settlement. The negotiations have to be finalized as part of the Geneva process. Efforts have to be made to help the country recover post-conflict. Our today's meeting seeks precisely to address this strategic goal. We are going to talk in detail about our next common steps to reinforce and build on the positive changes Syria has seen. We'll have an exchange of views as to how we can give a strong impetus to political settlement on the basis of Resolution 2254 of the UN Security Council. Let me remind you that this document stipulates a wide intra-Syrian dialogue involving all, without any exception, ethnic, religious and political groups of the nation. This is precisely what seeks to do the Russian initiative supported by you to convene in Sochi a Congress of National Dialogue in Syria. I suggest that we should talk about the parameters of this forum today. The Syrian nation itself will determine its future and to agree on the principles under which the governance is going to be carried out. No doubt, reform will be difficult. It'll require compromise and concessions on everyone's side, including the government of Syria, certainly. I am hopeful that Russia, Iran, and Turkey will work together, sparing no effort to make this job as productive as possible. I am confident that the success of forthcoming changes will, to a large extent, be dependent on addressing social and economic issues Syria is facing, restoring industry, agriculture, infrastructure, healthcare, and education systems. Of no less importance is the humanitarian factor. I refer in particular to targeted assistance to the population, demining the territories that have been liberated, as well as helping refugees get back to their homes. Incidentally, colleagues, after our joint decisions, as well as the establishment of de-escalation zones, hundreds or even thousands refugees are getting back to their homes. Given the colossal scale of devastation, we could think together, contemplating a long-term comprehensive program for restoring and rebuilding Syria. Our country's experts have done a great preliminary job to give substance to our today's talks, so I'm confident that this discussion is going to be both substantive and fruitful, whereas the agreements we're going to reach will serve further reinforcing peace, security in Syria, reinforcing its sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity, and our decisions are going to help strengthen stability in the Middle East. Colleagues, I'd like to thank you for your attention right now. I'd like to give the floor to the President of Iran, Mr. Hassan Rouhani, and then I'll give the floor to our friend, President Recep Erdogan of Turkey.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
In the name of God, gracious and merciful, dear Mr. Putin, President of the Russian Federation, dear Mr. Erdogan, President of Turkey, let me start by extending gratitude to His Excellency, Mr. Putin, the President of Russia, for organizing such an important and frank discussion in a wonderful city of Sochi. I would like to sincerely thank you for that. It is gratifying that over less than a year since the launch of the Astana process, the three countries, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Russian Federation, and the Republic of Turkey, have undertaken enormous efforts to counter terrorism and extremism, and have prepared the ground for the political settlement in Syria. Today, new prospects are emerging for the final settlement in Syria. I'm pleased with the fact that three countries are committed to territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence, and unity in Syria. They have expressed their commitment to close cooperation in the name of peace and stability in Syria. From the very beginning, the crisis in Syria was accompanied by direct foreign interference, including the provision of arms and comprehensive support to the militants, which evidently created the backbone of ISIL and Nusra, and were used to stoke up the flame of terrorism in the country and led to the prolongation of this crisis. Fortunately, today, the foundations of ISIL have been destroyed, and other terrorist groups are being disintegrated. That has been the result of courage of Syrian people and young people who have destroyed the foundations of terrorism and brought down the fire of evil. They are at the forefront of the international community in the fight against blatant atrocities threatening all the civilizations. It is of high importance to continue our fight against terrorism in order to destroy all terrorist cells and all militants in Syria, to liberate the people of Syria from the scourge of terrorism. I believe that people and countries of the region should learn a lesson from the artificial crisis staged in Syria. Certain powers are claiming their predominant position in promoting human rights, pursuing their own interests in the region, resorting to the large-scale use of terrorism and violence in the region. The powers haven't been able to derive this lesson, according to which terrorists will not be restrained to this region. It will spill over to all other regions of the world. Today, this region is on the threshold of new consequences that would lead to the destruction of terrorism. Those who created those terrorists are particularly scared of the destruction of terrorism and the transfer of violent Salafism to their country. And under this fear, they are trying to instigate a new crisis, undermining stability that has been brought about as a result of efforts undertaken by countries of the region, including Iran. The people of Syria for over 6 years have been fighting against terrorism that has been supported with finances, intelligence, and arms by foreign states in this unfair fight, and it needed the support of friendly peoples and governments. The Islamic Republic of Iran was the first state to respond to the call of the government and the people of Syria to give it assistance in the fight against terrorism. We responded to this call. We supported the legitimate government in Syria with a view to fight against terrorists and to destroy terrorists and to prevent the destabilization in Muslim countries that took place in Iraq. And we helped Syria get back to peaceful and safe life. We did our utmost to ensure the destruction of terrorists in Afghanistan and Iraq, and in these efforts we cooperated with the legitimate governments of those states. In the fight against international terrorism, we stand ready to provide assistance to other countries of the region should they need such a help. Unfortunately, some countries in our region follow this Zionist regime and US, trying to wreak havoc and discord between the countries of the region. Refusing to bear the responsibility for the split in the region that they brought about. The commitment of Iran to the fight against discord demonstrates its efficiency of a strategy based on cooperation with all the peoples, on friendship rather than enmity. All the efforts of the Islamic Republic of Iran are based on international law and the UN Charter principles. They are aimed at ensuring stability in the region. Our countries, thanks to concerted efforts, destroyed the rotten body of terrorism. We have dispelled the fear of terrorism in our region. Our August mission boils down not only to the fight against terrorism, but also against all forms of discrimination and elimination of poverty. We need to deepen our contacts as well as our contacts with regional institutions. With the help of such approaches, we could consolidate our region using all the advantages of our cooperation. As we work on the preparation for the National Dialogue Congress of Syria, I believe that the following aspects should be highlighted. First of all, the fight against terrorism is not over. And we should not give up our fight against terrorism and extremism in the region despite certain progress in the fight against terrorism in Syria. We need to undertake consolidated efforts until the ultimate destruction of terrorism in Syria. And as we pursue this fight, we need to ensure the respect of territorial integrity of Syria, where there is no pretext for the presence of foreign presence of other forces, the forces of other governments, without the consent of the legitimate authorities of Syria. Right now, the prospects have emerged for the development of new Syria, where the aspirations of people would be observed, national diversity would be ensured, and popular democracy will be introduced. The people of Syria will not let any foreign interference into its affairs, and any attempts to interfere into territorial integrity and sovereignty of the country. The role of the international community in the development of future Syria should boil down to providing assistance to the people of Syria to alleviate the plight of the people of Syria, to put an end to foreign interference in Syria, or imposing one's will in Syria, as well as humanitarian and economic assistance without any hidden agenda aimed at putting an end to the suffering of people in Syria. Necessary conditions should be created for the voluntary return of refugees to their homes. And here, cooperation between countries and international organizations is of high importance. The restoration of Syria, as well as the development of this country, would require a comprehensive assistance on the side of international community, with a specific focus on restoring destroyed infrastructure and setting up the conditions for the development of industry in this country, the participation of other countries. And our today's meeting is the beginning of this new stage. Our joint efforts over the last 11 months have demonstrated that it is only as a result of political coordination, including coordination on the ground and the commitment to agreements reached, success can be achieved in putting an end to terrorism. As for the National Dialogue Congress, for this endeavor to be successful in the same way as the Astana process, the positions of all three countries should be coordinated at all the levels. As I conclude, I would like to extend gratitude to the people and the government of Kazakhstan for organizing the Astana format meetings. I would like to extend gratitude to the people in the government of Turkey and Mr. Erdogan, and to the people in the government of Russia, Mr. Putin, for organizing, holding meetings in the Astana format. My sincere gratitude goes to everyone of you. I count on further cooperation in this trilateral format that would create the environment for ultimate settlement in Syria, and that would put an end to this torturing conflict. Thank you.
Уважаемый господин президент, все мы
Thank you, Mr. President. We all know that given the great influx of refugees, Turkey is bearing a huge burden, and it is an unprecedented situation. Hundreds of thousands of refugees have found themselves in Turkey, and Turkey has often found itself the victim of terrorist attacks. Right now, I'd like to give the floor to the President of Turkey, Mr. Recep Erdogan.
Sayın Devlet Başkanları,
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear friends, members of the press, I should like to express my satisfaction at being here with you in Sochi. My dear friend, Mr. Putin, I'd like to thank you for having us here in this trilateral format. I would also like to express my particular gratitude to Mr. Putin for the hospitality shown to me and to my delegation. Just last week, we met here in Sochi and talked in detail about the Syrian issue. Apart from that, we also discussed the Russian-Turkish relations. Today, we have here our distinguished friend, Mr. Rouhani, and being all three of us together, we will be able to have an interesting conversation. I avail myself of this opportunity. I'd like to touch upon the earthquake that struck Iran last week. I'd like to wish a speedy recovery to all the wounded, and may God take in all the souls of those who perished in that terrible earthquake. This trilateral format is of great importance because I hope it'll help us put an end to the bloodshed and put an end to the conflict that has been going on for many years. All the world has witnessed the positive steps that have been undertaken once Russia, Turkey, and Iran started to work together on Syria. Certainly, Kazakhstan also played an important role, for which I'd like to thank President Nazarbayev for giving us the platform for talks in Astana. The meetings in Astana have turned out to be of use to the whole region, so praise be to God. The outcomes are significant, but by no means sufficient. We believe that all the parties concerned have to make an important contribution to finding a political settlement of the conflict that would be acceptable to the Syrian nation. The heads of our general staffs have had meetings, and right now all the series of meetings is being crowned by our trilateral summit, and I do hope that we're going to emerge from this hall with good results. God willing, we will make important decisions here, and I pray to God that this summit should be useful.
Благодарю вас.